So today, we've got a film from my end of the pond. Yeah, that's right. We're going to examine a nice British horror film today. I mean, it's set in Sweden, filmed in Romania, and made by an American director. But it does open with football, complaining about the state of your pint in a pub, and a mugging. And that is British culture right there. The term underrated gets thrown around when people want to talk about films off the beaten path of the mainstream attention span. The problem with this is, when a film gets talked about as being underrated enough, it eventually becomes, well, just rated. If everyone in your gran is saying something is actually really good but super underrated, or that it's a hidden gem, well then enough people are probably singing its praises at that point and parroting that narrative that isn't even really a hidden gem anymore. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these people who get really mad when this phrase is used arguably incorrectly. I think it's a term with a lot of leeway in its interpretation, and since it's an adjective only ever used to celebrate a piece of art rather than put it down, if someone wants to call something underrated that's actually a bit of a hit, then sure, more power to you. Anything that puts a spotlight on a good film, book, game, whatever it may be. It's fine by me, even if I don't agree with how you're defining the adjective you're using to describe it. So I don't give any of this preamble to call people out for using the word wrong or anything daft like that. I'm just putting it out there to say that I believe The Ritual falls into the camp of legitimately underrated in every sense of the word. Generally speaking, when people say that, they mean either something didn't get the critical assessment it deserved, or that maybe it did, but not enough people watched it or know about it. In the case of The Ritual, I believe both happened. It came out to, let's say, fairly middling reception. Every now and then you'd see someone champion it a bit, but there was enough negative stuff there to kind of level general reception out. It didn't make a huge amount of money here where it was released theatrically, and outside of the UK, I believe it mostly just went straight to streaming. And while it definitely has its fans, including my skeleton self, a lot of people either didn't catch it, don't know about it, or have forgotten about it entirely. Hell, even when you look at most of those underrated horror movies lists that often circulate the internet, while you'll often see names come up repeatedly, you'd be hard pressed to find many spotlighting this 2017 folk horror, despite the fact that it's legitimately, at least in my opinion anyway, really great. There's genuinely something really special here. Directed by David Bruckner, the guy who made the only good section of the first VHS movie, Don't At Me, I Am Right, and adapted from the 2011 Adam Neville horror novel of the same name, along with some fairly significant plot changes to its inciting incident and third act, The Ritual follows the story of 5 friends taking part in a classic British tradition, the lad's holiday. Because that's what it's about, innit? Having a wild one, getting on the sesh, just 5 lads on holiday, innit? I have never been a bloke. Not once in my life have I ever been described as a bloke. Before they leave for it though, one of them is murdered. Just 4 lads on just 4 lads on a lad's holiday, innit? Getting murdered. Our victim is Rob, a much beloved member of the group whose death leaves a lasting impact on the rest of the friends, especially protagonist Luke, who was in the shop with him at the time of his murder. But paralysed by fear, hid around the corner and considered intervening, but not before it was too late and his friend was killed for the ring on his finger. It's a truly chilling and awful scene, and one of the scariest moments of real grounded violence I've seen in a horror film. As the audience, you are trapped with Luke in this state of helplessness. There's a deep discomfort as you mentally plead with him to step in, because you can absolutely see how this is going to go, but the entire time you just know he's not going to help. And there's so much emotion at play. There's this moment where Rob looks back at Luke, who the thieves are still unaware is there. Just for a second, he delivers this expression that feels almost pleading, almost disappointed, like he's nervously waiting for his friend to come to his rescue, but you're watching him in real time realize that's not going to happen. Paul Reed does wonders here in leaving a lasting impact with such a small role, delivering a huge level of weight to this moment. There's so much going on here. He manages to communicate the complexities of this not quite a betrayal, but not quite not a betrayal either, with just a brief expression. This mental battle of wanting to keep his friend safe and not wanting to draw attention to him, and understanding and sympathizing with his fear, but at the same time communicating the contradicting emotion of disbelief that he would be abandoned to face this horrifying moment alone by somebody who's supposed to care about him. It's sudden, it's gripping, it's heartbreaking, it's brilliant. And then, when you just about can't stand the tension, one of the thieves violently cracks Rob across the head with his weapon. And while it might not be the kind of thing we would normally think of when we say the word jump scare, it's sincerely one of the most effective use of jump scares in the film, if not the genre. Jump scares rarely get me these days as I've become a little desensitized to them, but when that piece of metal came down on his head the first time I watched this, I flinched. My heart genuinely skipped a beat, and I involuntarily gasped. Even though you know it's coming, it's still shot and directed in such a way as to feel really sudden and terrifying. And it's rare for a horror film to depict real-world violence in such a way as to really articulate how scary it is. It's incredible stuff. Anyway, with Rob gone, the remaining lads, Phil, Hutch, Dom, and a guilt-ridden Luke, decide to have their holiday hiking in Sweden because even though they all really didn't fancy it when it was suggested in the film's opening pub scene, it was the place Rob wanted to go, and it feels like a fitting tribute in his memory. Unfortunately for them though, they're all a bunch of hopeless Brits, and one of them, Dom, buggers his knee up, leading to Hutch to suggest that they can get to the lodge they are staying at quicker if they stray off the hiking trail and cut through the dense forest in the distance, stripping a potentially massive 8 hours off their journey. You can probably guess that decision turns out to be not such a good idea. The movie then switches from the violent real-world horror of London muggings to the fantastical folk horror of dark European woods. And it's here we see just how beautiful and well directed this film is capable of being. This is a really gorgeous looking movie that utilizes movement, natural light, shadows and angles to great effect in painting its forest location with a dark, foreboding atmosphere. Through clever camera placement, the forest becomes a character unto itself, like an almost labyrinthine supernatural prison that you could truly believe would go on forever. The constant slow tracking shots create this sensation of dread, and wide angles that position the characters in the frame as really small but don't show the tops of the trees make the woods feel impossibly tall and infinitely deep. It has this dark fairy tale-like quality to it, aided significantly by just how good of a location they found, because man, even without this gorgeous cinematography, these boys are surrounded by some scary looking trees. The sharp jagged edges of their long densely packed branches making them look less like something you want put in your house at Christmas and more like Iron Maidens. The way they're all clustered together so tightly too gives this whole film this deep sense of claustrophobia, which is a pretty incredible feat when you think of how 90% of it all takes place outside. The film begins to pour on this sense of unease and dread with an increasingly creeping darkness and greater tensions erupting between the group as they slowly begin to realise just how bad this idea they've had was. Eventually, we get to the reveal you've probably all suspected. They are not alone here, and whatever is out there is not friendly. I'll not spoil too much of what happens here because I do think that this is a film that enough people won't have seen, but one that people really should check out. So without going into specifics, I'll say that the film is very good at holding back. Rather than going in all guns blazing with the definitive revelation that there's a monster in the woods, the film drip feeds uncomfortable weirdness and surrealism to you at a slowly increasing frequency. At first, it's just a dead animal, albeit one found in extremely peculiar circumstances. Then maybe the group encounters some symbols that don't seem right to them. Then maybe something weird is found in an abandoned house. Then maybe they all have a nightmare. But the intensity of the nightmares and the strange way it makes them all act in their sleep feels beyond unusual. Tensions bubble and rise as the group slowly lose their individual cools in the face of increasing discomfort, chilling weirdness, and a very real and increasing sense that they're all in danger. And with this, their friendships are challenged as filters slip and deep issues and resentments come to the surface, giving us great character drama and realistic dynamics to ground the audience in real people and problems that they can invest in. And this gives us a reason to care about all of the spooky stuff. The film makes sure to always centre these characters and their relationship, with Luke's guilt and the unspoken tensions now felt between him and his friends because of that night he hid while Rob was murdered being the main narrative draw, and not just, ooh, scary trees. And it's all executed extremely well. The cast all put on excellent and believable performances, especially Rafe Spall, who I'd like to single out for playing Luke as a man who feels truly haunted by what he did, or rather I guess, didn't do. There's a real sense of weighty regret he seems to carry with him in every frame, and it comes across in all his mannerisms and delivery. His unwillingness to often look people in the eye, the constant smoking, the 1,000-yard stares. There's a great and really telling little moment early on in the film where before everything goes to hell, the group take a holiday selfie and come on, just look at Luke's face compared to the others. That man's soul died the night that Rob did. The film captures such a compelling discomfort not just within its setting and folky horror, but in its perfect dissection of traditional masculine British friendships. They're just such blokes, just such normal men, just innocent men. You can tell that they've got these blockers on that so many men in these kinds of dynamics do when it comes to talking and just communicating. Rob's memorial scene feels awkward and staggered. You can tell there's a deep sadness in all of them during this moment, but the most we get in terms of anything being said is a few subdued sniffles from Hutch and a joke about Rob's old dog from Phil. There's so many things going unsaid. When it comes to Luke especially, there's clearly this elephant in the room that every now and then feels like it's on the cusp of being addressed, but they all just end up skirting around it in this really uncomfortable way. It isn't until they're under copious stress and everything has gone to hell and these sentiments just aggressively explode out of them that anyone feels able to say anything about how they actually feel. The group dynamics are so true to life. There's all these small throwaway lines that indirectly give the audience so much information. There's this vibe that they're all growing up and growing apart before any of this awful stuff even happens to them. And we get this little line from Luke to Rob about how, don't you think it's getting harder now to have a good time? And all the memories they reminisce on are of getting drunk with one another in their uni years. They're just clinging to that past that gives them this obligation to stay in one another's lives. When Hutch has Luke to one side, he says, "I've said it before, don't care what anyone says. Wasn't your fault, mate." Which is a weird thing to say in a conversation where no one had suggested it was. It's such a vivid portrayal of that sensation of growing apart from someone for no reason other than your lives are beginning to take different directions, with the added discomfort of bad blood just beneath the surface that no party is willing to talk about. And I think the way it depicts this is so true to the average British pub-going male. From the script to the performances, it all just feels so human and honest. And it's this element of the film that I think is the special ingredient that makes something truly great here. And none of this stuff occurs detached from the horror either. This isn't a story of living with survivor's guilt and difficult friendship dynamics and then, oh by the way, there's also something in the woods. The thing in the woods, the nightmares and all the creepy goings on, they all thematically link right back to that central idea of living with guilt. As more and more danger arises and his friends' lives become under threat, Luke has a chance to not be the bystander this time. A chance to redeem himself in his own eyes, someone who can try and save his friends and not let them die, a chance to correct his biggest regret and mistake. Everything exists to serve this rich central theme, and then when the third act reveals the true nature of the monster, it all clicks into place in a rewarding way. Obviously, gotta get into more specific spoiler territory to talk about this part, so I do recommend you skip to this bit of the video if you want to check this film out, and I really recommend that you do, but if you aren't bothered or have already seen it, then I want to say that this film does one of my favourite things in horror, and that is the monster as metaphor. In the third act of the movie, Dom and Luke are the only remaining survivors. It's just two lads, innit? Just two lads having a lad's holiday. And despite Dom being the most critical of Luke's, as he put it, cowardice when it came to potentially saving Rob, a concept that once again arguably circles back to these lads' ideas and concepts of masculinity, Luke is doing his very best to keep at least one of his friends alive, promising to never leave his side and swearing up and down that he's going to get him out of here, which is especially difficult considering Dom's injured knee. The two manage to find a house to take shelter in, but on entry are met with a cult who worship the creature in the woods, who knock them out and tie them up for ritual sacrifice. Dom is beaten to be prepared for sacrifice, but Luke is spared this fate for unknown reasons. One of the cult members explains to him that the creature in the woods is kind of a god, and he grants the cult immortality in a world without regret and pain. Luke is given the option to join the cult and receive these gifts, because the pain of his guilt is great and the creature can remove that feeling. However, it should be noted that they all live in a kind of perpetually primitive and subservient state to this being, fearful of its power. And this is super interesting because it's such a great metaphor for the ways you can deal with guilt and the way Luke has carried his. Sure, Luke could join the cult and he would be spared, living a guilt-free existence for the rest of his eternal days. But would he be free? Is that overcoming his guilt or just suppressing it? The way Luke has carried his guilt so far has been to bury it down, to ignore it, to hide it away under chain smoking, unspoken words, and 1,000-yard stares. This way, he never has to address it. He can, in a way, live without its consequences, just like what the cult and its monster offers him here. But in doing that so far, he is completely subservient to it. He's imprisoned by it, forever cursing himself to sit in this perpetual feeling of finding ways to avoid that pain. He may never have to address that this is what he is doing. He may never have to address that pain, but he will forever live in fear of it. Just as life under the monster would let him avoid that pain, but he'd constantly live in the consequences of the fear of it. The monster here and the decision which it symbolizes are integral to Luke's journey. Luke must choose the far more difficult path and face the monster, even if it comes at great pain, if he ever wishes to be free of its grasp. And in finding the bravery that he lacked in that convenience store, a bravery that is cultivated and nurtured throughout the traumatic events of this film and culminates in his final showdown with the creature, Luke is effectively facing his own guilt. I mean, how did people sleep on this film? That rules, that's so good. Not to mention as well that the monster design is absolutely stellar. A fantastic mix of practical effects, CGI, and a genuinely unique design. A lot of monsters in movies and TV these days can often kind of blend into one. A lot of similar shapes, a lot of similar greys, usually either based in kind of exaggerated humanoid or animal proportions. You know the kind of thing I'm talking about. Here the monster is like nothing I've seen before. Put together with brilliant imagination by director Bruckner, as well as longtime concept artist for Guillermo del Toro, Keith Thompson, the creature of the ritual is a truly wild creation. The monster itself is almost its own mystery, as it's revealed bit by bit in elements that almost seem to contradict one another. There's definitely some animal influence, as it has a kind of moose-like quality, and they cleverly actually use the moose-like silhouette as a misdirect at first, so you think you know what you're in for, but when you properly see it, it has this almost eldritch abomination quality to it, with those weird eye-like things in its chest and human arms and hands that come out in the same area. When it stands up tall, it makes all these weird, almost rune-like shapes with its figure. It's great, truly otherworldly, and pulling from all sorts of mythic influences. Legitimately fantastic stuff. Honestly, even if the film sucked, I'm surprised it didn't become a massive cult hit off the strength of this incredible creature design alone. Even if the film didn't deserve a massive fandom, this monster certainly does. So yeah, all in all, simply put, The Ritual is a banger, and I genuinely do not understand the lukewarm reception from critics and audiences it received upon its initial release. Just something that unfortunately happens sometimes, I guess. But hopefully, many more people will, like me, discover it over the years and potentially see in it the same things I do. I really love this film, and you know what? Everyone else I know who has seen it ended up really loving it too. So who knows, maybe there's time for things to turn around on this one, and it'll become something of a much more well-known cult classic. It's a little bit of the Blair Witch, a little bit of the Wicker Man, and a little bit of its own incredible thing. There's a lot of, I believe, really special stuff here, and I definitely think it deserves some recognition for that. I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already, and if you do check it out, don't forget to take away the true moral of the story, which is, of course, don't go hiking. Just don't. Why would you do that? There are so many better things you could be doing with your time. In fact, better yet, don't go outside. It's shite out there. What, you want to get lost in a forest? You want to freeze on a mountain? You want to get asked by a stranger whose phone has died if you have the time? And then you say yes because you want to be polite, and then go reach your phone only to find you're wearing skinny jeans and you've put your phone in wallet in the same pocket, and now like an idiot trying to get this phone out, and your hand gets stuck, and you have to kind of do this awkward shuffling, almost jerk yourself off motion to try and wiggle it free for an uncomfortable amount of time while they just stand there watching you, not sure whether to cut their losses, acknowledge the embarrassing nature of the situation and say it doesn't matter, or hang on so that they don't have to acknowledge things have gotten low-key weird, but all while being painfully aware that there's no knowable time limit on how long this whole interaction will take, and that every second that goes by it just gets weirder, only for you to then finally pull your phone out after way too long, go to read them the time on it, and then have to say, sorry, my phone is dead too. Is that what you want? Sod that. Stay inside. Be warm. Watch horror movies. Play Magic the Gathering. Just remember to not accidentally acquire any product early, or Wizards of the Coast will send the actual Pinkertons round your house to threaten you, steal your stuff, and make your wife cry. What the hell was that about? That happened. Look it up. This video has been over for a while now. I'm just rambling nonsense at this point. I got a cool Patreon with cool stuff in it. Like and subscribe. Please donate to Trans Lifeline. Also vote for me in the In Face of Horror competition. And as an advisor on the new In Search of Darkness mega documentary on early 90s horror, I got a discount code for you guys if you want to check out. Links to everything in the description. There we go. Fix it. Seamless recovery.